Good evening, Ram fam. We are thrilled that you have joined us tonight for the final leg of our Family Common Read series with our long-awaited author chat with Marjorie Savage, author of You're on Your Own Now, but I'm Here If You Need Me. Just a little background on our author. Marjorie Savage worked in parent and family services at the University of Minnesota for 24 years. She is officially retired now, but she continues to write, research, and consult on the role of families during the students' college years. She is currently working with faculty and graduate students in the University of Minnesota's Department of Family Social Science on a series of surveys tracking the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on college families. Welcome, Marjorie.
Thank you. It's nice to be here with you.
Well, thank you for being here with us virtually tonight in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Shall we get started?
Let's do it.
All right. So first, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about yourself and why you wrote this book.
Well, in addition to what you've said about me, I am a gardener and a master naturalist, which means that it's a lot like being a master gardener, only more woodsy. As far as my career, I have worked, like you said, for many years with parent and family services. Starting back before there really were a lot of schools that had parent and family programs. So been through the long haul with it. And when I started, which was really the first half of the 1990s, colleges and universities had one message for parents, which was essentially let go. There was a book at that time. It was called Letting Go. It's a wonderful book. I think it's still available. Really good information in it. And the title, like I said, was Letting Go. And parents took that message at that time really quite well. They understood their children were 18 years old. Legally, they were adults. They were supposed to be responsible. So the job of parents at that point was simply let go. But this was also a time when K through 12 schools were telling parents it's really important that you be involved in your students' life, a whole different message. You should know their teachers, you should know their friends, you should visit the classroom, you should volunteer in the classroom, you should help your student with their homework so you know what they're learning. Well, by about the year 2000, when those students were coming to college, we were still saying, it's time to let go. And parents didn't take that very well at that point.
I wonder why.
It was just a different message than what they were used to. And being involved had worked for them and for their kids. So you'd see them sitting in the audience during orientation, hearing this message about your job now is to let go. And they would like cross their arms and sit back in their chairs and tilt their heads and look at you a little bit disturbed. And you knew they weren't taking it well. And then they started saying, wait a minute, don't you tell me when to let go. Yeah, my kid is 18 years old now, but he just had a birthday last week and he didn't immediately become mature and responsible. So I will decide when he's old enough for me to actually let go. Well, I would hear those complaints from parents and I would go home from orientation and tell my husband, probably more times than I should have, that somebody needs to do something about creating a new message for parents because this one just wasn't working anymore. And we need a new book and letting go just isn't the message. So when my birthday rolled around, he handed me an envelope and said, happy birthday. And in the envelope, there was a registration form for a continuing education class titled How to Write a Book Proposal. And he had written on that registration form, if someone needs to write the next book for parents, let it be you.
Oh,
yeah. Well, I had no intention of writing a book. This was a total surprise to me, but I am not one to waste money, and he had already paid for the class, so I figured I had to go. And I spent, I don't know how many weeks going to this class and doing the homework. And by the time we were done, I had a book proposal nearly ready. It was it worked well, I gotta say. I still needed to find an agent, and that happened. And about a year and a half after I finished that class, the book was published. So that was the first edition, and we're now in a third edition because things keep changing in the world. So technology has pretty much forced me to rewrite the book twice. So that's where we are with it. And my goal for the book really is just to recognize that the college years are a major transition, not just for students, but for the entire family. So I hope that that is the message that people can get from the book.
Certainly the message I got from the book. And I think that's really interesting when you talk about changing the message from letting go to you're on your own, but you're here if you need me, because that's sort of the message that we've changed at orientation as well. So that very much tracks with the experience at Westchester. And I hope our family listening this evening or later date can sense that we know that their role is important and that we want them involved. So just managing what that involvement looks like is important. So while we're on the topic of the title, can you tell us a little bit more about that significance?
Well, and truly what I think, I hope what the book says with its title is a combination of those two messages. Certainly your student is 18 years old. It's time for them to be responsible. So saying you're on your own is not a bad message, but following it up with but I'm still going to be involved if you need me. I'm here if you need me, makes a huge difference. That actually was not the title that I intended for the book. When I wrote the book proposal, I thought that it should be called distance parenting, because distance learning was big then, fairly new, but big. And to me, what we were talking about was a sense of, this is changing your parenting from a distance. But my editor did not like that title at all. And she told me to write a new one, and I tried, and she rejected every one I came up with. She finally said, why don't you sit down and just write, brainstorm 10, 12 different titles, and we'll find one in there. And I did that, and she didn't like any of those either. So somewhere in the process, my oldest son came home, and he's a very creative person, good writer. And I said, you need to help me because I'm just not getting this, and I have to have a title. So he read the proposal, and we talked about it, and he said, I can't think of anything except what you used to tell us when we were in college. And I said, what was that? And he said, you're on your own, but you're here if we need you. So I wrote that down and sent it to the editor, and she immediately jumped on it and said, that's the title. Let's go.
Oh, that's so nice that it's part of your advice that you gave your sons. That's so sweet.
Well,
my mom always said, when I left for school, every single time my mom said to me, use your head to make good decisions, your heart to form trusted relationships, and your hands to help those in need. So for me, that could be the name of my book.
There you go.
I'm kidding. I kid. But I think that's so sweet because it's what sticks, right? That's wonderful. Another piece of your book that I just loved was the College Parents Pyramid of Protection. Can you talk a little bit about the pyramid, maybe for the folks that are still getting through the book, explain the pyramid, and then how it can help incoming families?
Well, it's based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if people know that, they understand right away what I'm talking about. But essentially, what that says is that there are certain basic essential needs that you have to take care of before you can go on to higher activities.
Right.
So the first thing you have to do is you have to know that you have food, shelter, a place to sleep, and then you can go on to the next step up, which would be like health and safety sorts of things. And for parents, I think it's an ongoing thing throughout your entire life, but whenever there's a transition for your child, you want to know those basic things absolutely first. So going to college, it's like, do they have food? Do they have a room? If they're traveling, if they're commuting to school, where are they going to park? What's that going to be like? And when we see parents on move-in day, you can really tell that this makes a difference. I remember parents coming in and immediately jumping on, wait a minute, this room isn't going to work for my student. There's one parent a mom who came up to the desk at the residence hall carrying this plastic sandwich bag sealed up, and in it was a little bug. And she was absolutely horrified and said, this was in my daughter's room, and it can't be, she can't live in a room where there are bugs like this. Well, it was a box elder bug. I don't know if you have those in Pennsylvania.
We do.
Okay. Yeah. Perfectly harmless, kind of unattractive and ancient looking, hard to kill. But totally harmless. And this mother had never seen one of those before, and one was too many. But the meaning is that you already know that your student has like a meal plan, you've signed a contract for it. You know that they've got a room, they've signed a contract for it, but you still have questions as they're coming in. And that's going to happen actually throughout your life. If they move into an apartment in a year or two, you're going to want to see that apartment and get to know the students that they're living with, so that, make sure they're okay. And, eventually they can work their way up step by step into the more important sorts of activities, like choosing a major and a career and self-fulfillment and all of those things. But you'll always go back to those basics when there's a change in your life.
That's perfect. I'm getting a lot of calls about housing and dining right now, as you can imagine. And it definitely makes sense, right? Like, we need to make sure those things are right and planned and prepared before we move on to anything else.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And parents shouldn't feel bad about feeling that way. It's totally natural.
Right. Of course. It's part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We want to make sure food and shelter are taken care of. So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. My next question is about solo parenting, which you talk about throughout your book. What advice do you have for solo parents? And maybe you could talk about the distinction you've made between solo and single parents.
Well, single parent families certainly can experience the whole college transition differently than partnered parents. And solo parents, I'm not sure if I have the same meaning that you do, solo versus single. I would say a solo parent is one where you are the only parent, and single, you may have a co-partner, but it's just not living with you, something like that. And I think family relationships are just a little different when there are only, the parent and the child or children. Those children take on a lot of responsibilities, a lot of authority that a lot of our other students wouldn't have. And it just makes a difference then when they are leaving home. I remember, I think it's in the book, there was a male student, and there were 3 kids in the family and the mom. And the mom was absolutely confident that her son was going to be fine. He was responsible. He made really good decisions. He was a great problem solver. She wasn't the least bit worried about him. But they got to school that first day, and she realized that it wasn't her that was worried. It was her son, that he felt like he was abandoning them. And he's suddenly thinking, I shouldn't have decided to move to campus. I should be living at home. He's offering to come home every weekend so he can help catch up on things. He's worried about the younger children because, they're going to come home from school and there's nobody there. He won't be there for them. And the mom was utterly surprised that she hadn't even considered that aspect of it. There was another, it's a mom who realized that her daughter played more than just a daughter role in her life. They would come home at the end of the day and sit across the table from each other while they were eating and talk about how their day went. And with that child gone, who was she going to share this basic information with? What was she going to do at dinner time? It was really hard on her. And I guess my advice then for single parents or solo parents, whichever you want to call it, is to start thinking now quickly about what are you going to do? You don't have to have something planned for every night of the week, but plan something for one night, maybe 2 nights after work about what will you do? Will you go take a yoga lesson? Will you go do some hobby or something like that? Meet up with a friend for dinner once a week. Plan something so that you have something in mind that will be different and new and exciting and interesting and keep you going, because it can feel like a tremendous loss.
I think that that's good advice for single parents and families that are leaving a student at school, because I think that the dynamic changes every year. I talk to families who are struggling with that adjustment of what that looks like and what their purpose is without their student at home. So I always suggest to make a reservation for dinner that first or second night that you're home from campus, if you're dropping off a student, and get out and do something new, try something new. That's great advice. While we're on the topic of special populations, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about first generation families. So Westchester first generation families are those who have students who come to campus who neither parent has a bachelor's degree. So we have a Westchester's First program that's specific to our student population, but what advice do you have for those families?
Well, certainly it can be hard for a parent to understand what college is if they haven't ever been there. And another category would be a parent who went to school or went to college, university in another country, because the United States education system is just not the same as what a lot of other countries have. So how do you support your student if you don't know that? I guess where I see first generation parents as being particularly successful is that they have a tendency to encourage their student at a different level. They believe in their student and they let their student know that. Some of the research that I've done, it has always surprised me to find that first generation students and their parents communicate more often than the average student does. They share a lot more information. The student basically teaches the parent about what college is as they go along, and the parent incredibly supports that, and moves them forward. And I think that's where they come in. And it doesn't have to be a parent, it can be an older sibling maybe that provides that. But you hear students, first generation students, so often say, I would never have been here, I would never have been able to do this unless my mom or whoever it is had been so supportive. And that's just the most valuable role that they can play, is asking questions, listening, being in touch. And like you said, you have support systems for students, and if parents are aware of those support systems, pass that information along as it's needed.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And the only thing I would add to that is to know that if you are a first generation family listening to this, that no question is a silly question. Every question is important. We are here to help you. That is our full-time role, the Office of Parent and Family Relations. So never feel like a question's not worthy of anyone's time, because you and your students are worthy, and we are happy to be there to be supportive of you, because it's not just first gen families that I'm hearing from, it's all families. So stay in touch, be in touch, and continue being that supportive family that you are for your student. All right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. This year will be different, another unprecedented year on campus. I guess my question is, what do you think will be different? I mean, besides everything. And also, what would you rewrite or change about your book for the class of 2025?
As to what will be different, honestly, who knows? There's just no end to this. I actually recently did a college visit with a rising high school senior, and I was amazed at the student guides at the colleges we went to. It was like they were suffering post-traumatic syndrome or something. They really were in a state of shock about how the past year and a half has gone. And I mean, they were well trained, they knew what to say, but they kept going back to, well, but we really don't know because we didn't know that this was going to happen. And it's really been hard on students. It's really been hard. Well, it's been hard on everybody, but hopefully students will have a more normal experience this year. Hopefully they will get to be the college students that they imagine themselves to be. One of the things that I do think, well, what would I do differently if I were to rewrite the book? I think I would talk a lot more about resiliency, about the ability to take what happens and deal with it, face it, make it better in some way. It's incredibly hard. I would also say that I would talk a little bit more in the book about online learning, about the changes that have been forced to the front. They're not all new. Online learning has been around for a long, long time. It's just that not everybody had to do it. So it's not that it's new. I think we were moving in the direction that we have gone, but we were moving much more slowly, and all of a sudden we had to do it quickly. In a lot of ways, I think that today's students are going to be more prepared for the world that they're going to work in because they have had to do everything so quickly and learn all of this and move forward. But I don't think it's an entirely horrible thing. I think that, like I said, the world was already headed this way, and the pandemic just made us move a lot faster.
I remember when we prepared for this chat, you said that these students are better prepared and have more grit because they've been through this. And I've said that to families since. And I think that that's a really beautiful way of looking at some of this, because we've all learned a lot and they've learned a lot and they're more prepared to handle transitions than any student class that's ever come in before. And I keep saying that at orientation. But they're positioned to transition, right? They're used to that. And they're learning a lot of really good skills. So I love that silver lining, positivity that you imbued in that comment.
I would never wish this on anybody.
Of course not. But there are lessons that have been learned, and we'd be remiss not to mention them.
Mm-hmm. And I think education is going to gain from it in the long run. The fact that you may not have to go so far to get a graduate degree or something like that. It makes a difference in your life. So we'll get through it. We got this. All right. My next question is a little bit more tangible. You review in your book the 4 action steps when students do something or say something that conflicts with family values. Can you explain how those can be adapted with our new technology that our students are using? Okay, a couple of things here. First of all, I don't think that it's only just talking about conflict. I think it's talking about any issues that are difficult to talk about. It's hard to deliver bad news. It's hard to deliver news that you don't think your family is going to like. But what the 4 steps are is, first, just for the parents, if this is happening, just listen. Don't interrupt. Just let the student get the words out, because it's hard. It's hard to tell you something that they're afraid you're not going to like. Don't try to fix it in the meantime. When they're done, thank them for telling you. It's hard for you to hear, but it means a lot just to have you say, well, I appreciate that you can tell me this. It takes a lot of the sting out of what's been said and fear that you're going to be mad. The 3rd step is to ask how they're feeling and how can you help? Is there anything you can do? The feeling part, it's often a surprise to them how they feel after they have told you something different. And what this can be about might be like gender identity or a sexual assault, or maybe they got in trouble with the law or financial, something like that. And they're going to be afraid that you're going to be mad and you won't love them anymore. And just hearing them hearing you say, okay, how are you feeling now? And it's surprising that often it will be like, well, I feel relieved that I told you. It's good to have it off my back. And it might be, I was really scared, and now it's okay. I'm not happy about what happened, but I think I can move on. And then finally, just tell them that you love them and keep listening. What's important is for you not to let any anger or sadness or fear come out, but just listen, because right when you hear it, it's hard, and you will feel awful about it. But 2 weeks from now, you're going to have a whole different perspective. So if you can just take it in and listen and wait on it and let it sink in, that will help. The other part I wanted to mention, though, is that it's not always the student who is giving the bad news. It can be a parent calling the student and letting them know, there's a divorce, or 4 years is a long time for nothing to happen. There will be things that happen in your family, and it could be, an illness, a family member's illness, or the dog dies, or some horrible thing happens, and you have to tell your student. And how you go about it needs to be also thought through very carefully. Students often don't even respond. Like if you call and say, your grandfather had a heart attack and it doesn't look good, your student is very likely to simply say, well, tell him I said hi, and then I got to go. I got to study for a test. And you think they haven't even heard you. They have heard you. They have heard every word you said, and they will go and talk to their roommate or their friend about it. They just didn't know what to say to you. So it's tough. But if you can slow your emotions down, in either case, I think it helps. As to the technology side of it, I think it's a lot easier to deliver bad news through technology than to receive bad news through technology. It can make it a lot easier if you can tell the bad news and not see the body language. But as the listener, it would really help to see the body language and the emotional side of it. It can come across as very unemotional through technology. This could be partly because I'm older and I don't deal well with technology, but I don't like it when somebody delivers, bad news on Facebook or something like that. It just doesn't ring well with me somehow. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I think I really resonate with you saying it's easier to give bad news than receive it, because it does feel good, right? Like, I think in terms of touching on your idea that students are relieved to give the news, like it might be easier to just send that text message off, but they're dreading that phone call that inevitably will come. So it might just be a delay of anxiety. I do think there's some value in that call later, of course. I think the FaceTime later. I think FaceTime's pretty amazing. Zoom's amazing. I think it gives you the opportunity to see people and hear them. My partner is an introvert. So for us to not see his face, it could mean he's feeling nothing. But to see his face, I hear 1,000 words and 1,000 feelings. So I need to think about that a little bit. But I really liked the notion of thinking about how we're delivering news to students. We have a counseling center that's awesome, that does a lot of that short-term support for students who are hearing that news from families, managing divorce, managing relationships, managing illness. So that's a great resource we have. But families are a great sounding board for students too.
I love the fact that you can do counseling online now. It just opens up to students who would never have gone to see a counselor.
And the counselors are saying that the students like it more than they've liked the in-person in a lot of cases, because it's easier to have a little bit of a barrier between that. And the same might go for students who are going to be on campus for the first time in a long time, and having a little bit of that, maybe they'll be more willing to FaceTime than they were when they were living in your house because they get to see you with that a little bit of distance. So navigating the technology waters will be interesting for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so my next question is about giving students space. So you talk about giving students space when they're establishing their routines, when they first get to school, or if they just start their commuting. But how can families continue to serve as a support system and sounding board while still feeling like they're giving them space and not overwhelming them?
I remember a student whose mom had decided, I'm not going to interfere. I'll drop her off at school and then I will let her call me. I'm not going to be calling her every night or anything like that. But then she didn't call at all. And the student was really taken aback by that. It's like 2 weeks later and the mom hasn't called at all. And the student was rather disappointed. I would say, first off, that when you get home from your trip, well, first off, texting is the best thing in the world. I love texting for this very reason. You can send a message. Your student doesn't have to respond, but it's a text. So it takes, a half a second to send a heart back to you or something, or an okay. Phone calls can be disruptive, and students, if they see it's mom and they're busy, they're not going to answer. Text is just so much easier. So I encourage that. It's the best thing since sliced bread. Send a text. Student doesn't have to respond. They can if they want. You can send photos. It's great. When students have challenges, they will let you know, hopefully. And again, you just go back to that same message. Listen, see what's going on. Don't try to solve the problem for them. Ask them, how can you solve this? Who can you talk to about this? It's just a whole lot easier that way. Encourage them to use those campus resources. Be aware of what they are. Recommend them. You can't make your student take part in it, and follow the advice that you're getting from the parent and family programs. They're going to be talking about the things you need to know when you need to know them. And I think that's a really important factor.
Thank you for that endorsement. We will be sharing a lot of information through our RAM-Fam Monthly, and first-year families and second-year families will be getting a special little something, a little booster, if you will, additional information. But I wanted to touch back on the texting because I think that's really important to also note that so many students are self-conscious about their relationships with home and don't want to appear to be too connected or too involved with home. And I think texting provides that more private intimacy that is so hard, whether their peers think it or not. I think that there's so much self-consciousness, and that can a little picture of home, a picture of the pet, can really change a day, and help make a tough day a little bit easier. So I just wanted to say also, in addition to being easy and not disruptive, it also might help with some of those self-consciousness issues that I hear a lot about from students. They're fine to text their mom, but they don't want their friends to see they're talking to their mom, or they see their mom pop up on their phone calling constantly, right? There's a level of self-consciousness and embarrassment about that, which is a shame, right? Because being humiliated or embarrassed about your relationship with your family is not something that families want to hear, but it's something that our students deal with. So it's worth noting.
Also really, it's hard to hang up on a parent. It's hard to hang up on anybody.
Right.
And texting doesn't have that issue. So there's that side of it too.
Right.
And emails can take too long to write.
Well, we know our students aren't reading emails. Yeah. That is something that we could say objectively. Oh gosh, that's funny. Okay, so we're in the home stretch here. I wanted to talk. So we're heading into move-in week next weekend. We are excited to welcome our students back to campus, but it's a trying time for a lot of families who are dropping their students off. So what advice do you have for families for that move-in day for our residential students? And any advice for those critical conversations as we have that little bit of time now before school starts?
Well, as for the critical conversations, I would bet that you've already had them. At this point, your student probably isn't, well, they know what you're going to say and they know what you expect of them, and they're probably not going to listen. So I would say trust your lifetime relationships on that. Don't even worry about all of that. You have probably covered every base. In terms of move-in day itself, I always like to recommend that you not decide that this is going to be your last chance to go to a baseball game together, to go hiking or biking together, and you've got all the family's bikes on the car. Your student only wants to get there and see what's going on, and anything that takes away from that direct short route, they're going to be upset about. So just go. You can stop on the way back if you want to take a hike or something, or go out for lunch or something like that. But just get your kid to college. That's all they want that day. I would also recommend that you kind of let them be in charge of the day. If they want you to help, they will ask. If they want you to go, I remember taking my youngest son to college and getting all his boxes up to the room, and he starts opening boxes, and then turned around and said, you guys should just go somewhere. And we said, well, where should we go? He said, I don't care, go to lunch, go take a walk, go shopping, just go. You can come back later, but give me a couple hours here. And it worked. It's also hard to know, when do you leave?
Right.
When is it really truly time to leave? I recommend that you give your student some lead time. Say, look at your watch and say, we'll have to be leaving in about an hour here. So, and then they can say, well, you don't have to wait an hour, you can go now. Or they can say, well, I was hoping you could take me shopping, so can you spare a little more time? But let them be in charge in terms of what you need to do to help. They really don't like you deciding where the family photos should be, or where the socks should go, or something like that. And don't take anything personally that day. They can be brutal, but it's nerves. It's totally nerves. It's not that they hate you. And I have heard so many students after their parents left say, I was really awful to my family on move-in day. I need to apologize to them. So just know that it's a highly emotional day for them. It's something they've been waiting for forever. It's not going to be perfect, but just trust your student on this.
I like that. It's not perfect, right? No, few days are, but move-in day is tough. I think for Westchester, we're moving in over the course of a week. So it feels even harder, I think, for some families to know when to go, right? Because, well, there's some students that aren't moving until tomorrow. I'm staying as long as I want, right? I think it's easy to slip into that trap, but don't be trapped. I think that that's really good advice from Marjorie about, like, we're going to leave about in an hour. Do you want to go to the school store? One of our family council members mentioned on a call recently that it was easier for him and his family to leave the student at the school store rather than from the room or in front of the hall, because it felt like it was less emotional for the student and the family to see them in that space. So whatever that looks like for your family, think about that. I've also read some stuff about families being sure about what they want to say. Don't put too much pressure on yourself about that last saying, because I think, as Marjorie said, like, this doesn't need to be the final piece of advice you ever give your student. Aside from I love you and I believe in you, I think that that's pretty much the gist. And that you're on your own, but I'm here if you need me, right? I think that your book title says it all. But I think that so many families put so much pressure on it, and then they start crying, and then the moment is lost, right? Because that student just wants to be enjoying that moment and getting to business, right?
Right.
What a crazy day that some of our families have to look forward to. But you get permission from us to not take anything personally and to expect the best, but plan for non-perfection. I was wondering, Marjorie, if you wouldn't mind sharing a passage from the book that might help us center as we head into another unprecedented semester.
Well, this is kind of what we've been talking about, but I can give you my experience from taking my son, to college the first day. This is about a page, so bear with me here. Despite all your planning and preparation, the only sure thing about your student's first day of college is that it will be unpredictable. We just said that, right? When we took our oldest son to college, I was certain that we all were ready for this step. We packed our 2 cars for a leisurely 3-trip road trip vacation from Minnesota to Houston. With our 2 sons in one car and my husband and me in the other, we started a 1,300-mile journey south. We carefully planned meetings for gas, meals, and hotel stops along the way so that we could change drivers and make sure the vehicles were both running well. After arriving in Houston and finding the residence hall, we watched our son check in at the front desk. The student worker on duty welcomed him and gave him his room key, a booklet of residence hall rules, and a 2-page handout on bright yellow paper covered with bullet points and bold type. "These are your hurricane instructions," I heard him say to my son. "You might have heard there's a hurricane just off the coast. It was supposed to hit land farther east, but now they're saying it could come ashore near here sometime during the night. If it does, we'll be knocking on doors to get everyone up and moved into the hallway." I had been confident our son was prepared for everything he would need to know for college, but hurricane survival tips had never entered my mind. We hadn't paid much attention to the news on our way south, and a pending storm was not on my radar. I stepped up to the desk and said, "I have been reading all the information the university sent us, and there was never any mention of hurricanes. He's from Minnesota. He doesn't know about hurricanes." "It's okay, ma'am," the student said. "We've got this. We've been through it before." As hard as it was to accept, I had to recognize that things would happen during the next 4 years that I had never predicted, and my son wasn't prepared for. I needed to trust his judgment, and I needed to have confidence in the staff at this university. As they reminded us at the parent welcome, fully trained, professional, and caring advisors, safety officers, and student services personnel were on duty around the clock to deal with not only the typical problems that college students experience, but also any emergency situations that might arise. And I guess that's what I'd like you to take away from this, is that your student is probably more prepared for this than you realize. And the staff, the personnel on campus, know students. That's what they're there for. They have studied all of this. They have worked with all of this. You can trust them to be looking out for your student. They won't interfere, but they will intervene as needed. So have faith. We have all learned that you can't predict what's going to happen next, but you can trust that there are people who are looking out for your kid.
What a beautiful story. Thank you, Marjorie, for sharing that piece. A hurricane certainly was unanticipated, but I think that your resilience and family support of him in that time too reaffirmed that he was going to be okay. And if the school he was at the right place, he had the right people around him, and he had the values that the family had instilled in him. So I think that that's such a testament to your child rearing, but also the place you chose for your student and the developmental space that they were in. So what a cool moment. So I appreciate all you've shared with us. What a great piece of time that we've had together. I just want to know if you have any additional words of wisdom for our RAM fam as we move into this semester. Perhaps a reflection on that quote you just shared.
Well, what I would say, we've talked a little bit about it already, is certainly start thinking about how you as parents are going to celebrate this, because it is an accomplishment for the entire family. I have watched parents, even dads, leave the dorm on move-in day with tears in their eyes. But I've also literally seen parents dance out of the residence hall. And attitude makes a huge difference. Think about what you're going to do after you leave your student. Maybe you'll stop on the way home, have some chocolate sundaes or play some music that you haven't been able to play because your student didn't like it. Line that up in advance. When you get home, enjoy. Take a long hot bath. I remember one family saying that they had a bottle of wine sitting on the table waiting for them to come home that was bottled the same year as their student was born. So think about how you can celebrate this. It is your accomplishment too, and enjoy it. Your attitude makes all the difference.
Wow, you're the best. That was a pleasure. It's been so wonderful having you here with us tonight. You have such a fountain of wisdom and insight. And I hope our families who've joined us and will join us watching this recording later will enjoy this as much as I did. You are a treasure, and this was such a great time spent together. And I want to thank the families for being with us tonight. You've taken time out of your evening to make this plan around your students' journey and have invested in them. And they're so lucky to have family members who are invested in their journey and supporting them. And so thank you for that. And thank you for what you will continue to do when your student arrives on campus. They need you and we need you, and we appreciate all you're doing. So thank you for tonight. We hope you enjoyed this summer of our Family Common Read. I know that I did. We really enjoyed your book, Marjorie, and we just can't thank you enough for being here tonight.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been fun. And parents, take advantage of this person you have at your tip of your finger. So get in touch with her when you need her.
Oh, thank you so much. Have a great evening, everyone. Don't be strangers. We hope that we hear from you soon. So long.